The Hawks might have had the best offseason of any team, making a flurry of moves to maximize their strengths, shore up their weaknesses, and add depth. But what can we expect from them in 2026, and are they good enough to compete in the East? Last season, the Hawks were the perfect example of a slightly below average team. With a slightly below average offense and a slightly below average defense, they finished a game under 500 and earned the 9th seed. However, despite not making the playoffs, there was a lot to like. Jalen Johnson took another step forward in his development, and with the way he emerged as a 23-year-old athletic do-it-all forward, it's clear that Atlanta viewed him as Trae's long-term number 2. Unfortunately, he suffered a season-ending injury less than halfway through, so they probably win a few more games with him there. Dyson Daniels also took a step forward, showing to be a somewhat useful offensive player while having one of the most impressive defensive seasons we've seen from a guard in a while, and finishing second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Then there's the number 1 pick, Zachary Risacher, who played big minutes from day one. He's another big athletic wing who showcased all of the tools to develop into one of the league's most dynamic off-ball scorers. After that, the last piece was a center, and they found that in the form of Onyeka Okongwu, who gave them a ton of offensive and defensive versatility. So again, despite winning 40 games, it felt like the Hawks found a core 5, and really started to lean into a vision of size, athleticism, and defensive versatility around Trae. For the first time in a while, it felt like Trae Young was playing on a roster built to maximize his strengths while hiding his weaknesses. Clearly, the vision was to play Trae ball on offense and allow him to create easy shots for all of these guys. But the roster still had a few glaring issues. Firstly, they didn't really have anyone else they could rely on to consistently create for themselves in the half court. Even Jalen's at his best playing off the catch or in early offense, while the rest of their guys really didn't generate much pressure from a standstill. That created somewhat of an over-reliance on Trae, which really stood out whenever he went to the bench. By trading for Caris LeVert mid-season, they were able to mitigate some of these issues with him as a backup creator, but when LeVert wasn't there, the non-Trae offense fell by nearly 10 points. Maybe the biggest issue though was that the three-point shooting lacked a good bit behind what you'd expect from a serious team. Of that core 5 I talked about earlier, Risacher was the only one shooting above 34% from 3. Without the shooters to demand respect from defenses, there simply wasn't enough space for Trae's spread pick and roll game to be maximized. What if I told you that you could have the convenience of fast food and the taste of home cooking in one fresh meal? If you're like me and don't always have time to cook for yourself, Factor meals are perfect for you. It's as simple as unboxing, heating it up, and in a matter of 2 minutes, you'll have a fully prepared meal on the table. My personal favorite is the truffle butter filet mignon with a side of potato leek mash and roasted carrots. Not just because it's delicious, but because it's high in protein and fits my goals in the gym. There's so much variety though, and you not only have the freedom to choose, you have the freedom to customize. Maybe you want a chicken breast. Maybe you're looking for a calorie smart meal. Maybe you're vegan. No matter who you are, Factor makes it so easy to eat clean, and that's why I'm excited to bring you guys a special offer. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code HoopVenueFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. You heard that right. That's code HoopVenueFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for an entire year. Mission number 1 of Atlanta's offseason was to bring in more shooters, and their first move was a sign-and trade for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Over the last 3 seasons, he's made over 41% of his catch-and-shoot threes, and he's got a quick trigger, so he'll get them off with decent volume. But that isn't his only skill on offense. While he's not necessarily a creator, he does have a good enough handle to set up the offense or play off the catch and attack closeouts. He's also a pretty good passer, so between that, the handle, and the shooting, he's a good connector. Maybe more importantly, he's an awesome point of attack defender. Due to a wiry frame, he's less effective against bigger wings or more powerful offensive players, but that's why they've got Dyson Daniels. Against most creators, his length, agility, and ability to get around screens make him a big difference maker and give the Hawks another option next to Trae in the backcourt. He's someone who can play the 2 or the 3, and he unlocks some lineup versatility through his two-way skill set. Then a day after signing Alexander Walker, they traded for Kristaps Porzingis. He's another volume shooter, making about 40% of his catch-and-shoot threes over the last 3 seasons. Of course, the big difference is that he's doing it from the center position, which means he's often stretching opposing rim protectors and giving the Hawks a look they haven't had during the Trae Young era. I can instantly see the two-man game turning into a staple of the offense. Trae's on a short list of the best pick-and-roll playmakers we've ever seen. Between the pull-up shooting threat, the handle to get anywhere, and the ability to make any pass, defenses are forced to make tough decisions anytime he comes off a screen. Kristaps has some of that as a screener. Not only can he pop out and hit the three, he can roll and get above the rim, and maybe most importantly, he can counter switching by punishing mismatches from the post. While he isn't the type to create with his back to the basket, he's still a big time scoring weapon in those spots, and that adds another layer to the offense as a counter. Again though, with Kristaps, we're talking about serious value on both sides of the ball. Between his size, length, and timing, he's just a monster rim protector. In the last 2 seasons, players have shot 15% worse than their expected percentage within 6 feet of the basket with him contesting, which is the highest mark of any player in the league. He's not the most versatile defender in the world, lacking the mobility and overall awareness to execute a ton of different coverages, but if you can keep him near the basket or on the baseline as a helper like the Celtics did, he brings a huge defensive impact, which takes me back to lineup versatility. You know who can execute all of those different coverages and switch onto multiple positions? Onyeka Okongwu. He also brings some offensive skills to the table, such as the fact that he's a good pick and roll big who not only can get above the rim, but has great touch from anywhere in the paint. Or that he's a big time offensive rebounder who demands attention when he's operating without the ball. He's also a solid passer, so you can run some action through him up top as an initiator. And he's even been experimenting with the addition of a 3-point shot, so if he comes into next season as a reliable floor spacer, we might just have to reevaluate everything. Even now though, think about how many ways both he and Kristaps can be used on the floor together. Maybe Okongwu's playing in pick and roll with Trae, and Kristaps is spacing from above the break. Maybe Kristaps is running the 2-man game, and Onyeka's either spotted up on the wing, in the corner, or playing from the dunker. Maybe Okongwu's running the offense from up top, and Porzingis is playing from the dunker. There's really no shortage of offensive options, and Quinn Snyder's the type of coach who's shown that he can and will explore them all. Then on defense, you're pairing a versatile do-it-all big with a huge vertical presence, creating a big-time duo in the front court if Atlanta decides to go with double big units. That takes me back to what I said about lineup versatility. Alexander Walker can play the 2 or the 3 in most lineups, offering point of attack defense, reliable spot-up shooting, and a few ancillary skills on offense. Porzingis can play the 4 or the 5, offering floor spacing, multiple offensive counters, and high-level rim protection, and you can play him with or without Onyeka Okongwu, who's got the versatility to take on a ton of different roles. I haven't even gotten into Jalen Johnson, who might just be the most dynamic player on the roster. Need him to play like a screen and roll big? He can do it. Need him to handle the ball and attack an early offense? Sure. Need him to play away from the ball and attack closeouts or find openings to cut into and finish plays? That's where he's at his best, and he's another big athletic forward who can defend multiple positions, protect the rim, and really play any role you need him to. The only real question I have with Jalen moving forward is just how much juice he has as a shot creator in the half court. We've seen the downhill attack. We've seen the ability to make difficult passes, but the true on-ball stuff, like the ability to run pick and roll, the ability to beat defenders in isolation or out of the post, that comes and goes in flashes. And if he's ever able to turn that stuff into a consistent part of his game, driving serious value, we'd be talking about a legitimate all-star and high-level number 2. Atlanta's frontcourt depth doesn't stop there though. Reese Shea is going into year 2, and like I said earlier, he showed all of the signs of a dynamic off-ball weapon, which means that he's the type of player who should elevate his game alongside better talent. If he can put on some more strength, improve the jumper a little bit, and continue adding to his defense, I'm not sure you could think of a more ideal complementary piece for this roster. Mohamed Gay is going into year 3, and while he's still very raw, very limited on offense, he's got some awesome defensive tools. He's big, lengthy, and athletic. He can block shots and rebound, so you get some traditional big skills out of him, but with a very skinny frame, he lacks the strength or positioning to be a full-time 5, which he makes up for with his mobility and quick hands. He can cover lots of ground, switch onto multiple positions, and has great instincts for making plays on the ball. Then in the draft, they selected Asa Newell. He might not be a huge factor for the current team, but he's got lots of untapped potential and lots of valuable skills that should translate to the NBA. He's another big, athletic hybrid big who can play the 4 or the 5. He can get above the rim, has great touch, he's a solid passer, and he's even shown some flashes of an outside shot. Then on defense, he's a springy vertical athlete with a great second jump, who maybe lacks the size to be a full-time anchor from the 5, but has the versatility to play down between his feet, hands, and instincts, similar to what I talked about with Gay. He needs to put on some strength and could develop a stronger handle. If everything pans out though, he projects to be a nice two-way piece for Atlanta's future. All that's to say, the Hawks have a ridiculous front court. They've got size, length, and athleticism, They've got shooting, they've got above the rim finishing, they've got passing, they've got offensive, defensive, and lineup versatility. And when you couple that with an elite lead ball handler in Trae Young, who's going to create tons of easy opportunities or just put these guys in the right spots to succeed, it feels like the floor is really high. That doesn't mean the backcourt isn't interesting too, though. Like I said, Dyson's one of, if not the best defensive guard in basketball, which makes him an awesome fit next to Trae. However, he's a limited shooter, so there probably are situations where you'd rather have Alexander Walker, and if they're struggling to find offense in general, their other big move of the offseason was to bring in Luke Kennard. Kennard is flat out one of the best shooters of this era. Over the last 3 seasons, there hasn't been a more reliable one. We're talking 50% on wide open threes and 50% off the catch. He's so accurate it almost sounds fake. So if he's on the court, he demands constant attention, which just carries so much inherent value. There's even a little bit of off-ball creation in his game, with his ability to play on the move, make quick decisions, and find the right passes. Although he is a weak defender, meaning they probably don't want him starting or closing games with Trae. He's there to provide a different look. If they need offense, they can get it. If they need to diversify the offense when Trae sits, he can ramp up his volume. When it comes to building a Trae-centric team, Atlanta's front office hit the nail on the head. They've got great on-ball defenders. They've got great rim protectors. They've got size, athleticism, and versatility. They've got shooters. They've got play finishers. They've got connectors. However, if you take a look at the depth chart, you'll notice that there's one glaring weakness. Unless Jalen Johnson takes another step forward, they don't have a single player outside of Trae who can reliably create their own shot or create for others in the half court. That won't be a problem in the regular season because Trae Ball is a machine, but in the playoffs, with intentional scheming and more of an effort to highlight some of Trae's limitations, I don't really know if they have the guys to consistently break down high-level defenses. In a similar line of thinking, due to that lack of a second creator, how are they going to get offense when Trae goes to the bench? Right now, it looks like either one of Dyson Daniels or Alexander Walker projects to be the backup point, unless Vit Krejci or Keaton Wallace proves to be worthy of that role for extended minutes. So while they check a lot of boxes on both sides of the ball, it still feels like they're missing a few pieces to get them to that next level. Then between Jalen, Porzingis, Daniels, and Okongwu, they're relying very heavily on injury luck to even make it through the season. At full strength, I think they could be a 50-win team, but I'm expecting missed games, so I think they'll land closer to the mid-40s. Come playoff time, I think they've got a few exploitable weaknesses on both sides of the ball that hurt them against the best teams in the conference, so it's tough for me to see them getting over that hump and making the finals. But I don't think they're too far off, and it's important to keep in mind just how young this team is. Asa Newell is 19, Risa Shea is 20, Daniels and Gay are 22, Johnson is 23, Okongwu 24, and Trae is still just 27. The oldest player on the roster is 30-year-old Kristaps Porzingis, so this isn't a team that's gonna have to rush the process. With some sharpening of the edges, internal development, and luck with the injury bug, the Hawks could be closer to contention than you think.